we'll continue. Just a couple of things quickly is the different revolutions. So most of this stuff stems from American interests being violated by these countries. So the U.S. backs a leader of a different place, whether that's Guatemala or Nicaragua here, or even Mexico at one point. And basically what they're doing is they're trying to put someone in power that fits best with the U.S. economic interests. And what ends up happening almost every time is that person then does what they think is best for the interest of their particular country and in the people living in it, and ultimately the U.S. does not view that as something that benefits them. So lots of times they will specifically try and overthrow different groups of people or government groups to try to put in people in power that would be more helpful or would be more willing to work within the confines of the American business model. So we had in Guatemala a leader that basically was redistributing land that we had used to buy fruits from, and we overthrew the leader. Nicaragua, very similar. A group of soldiers was basically in charge of the country. So we basically let a terrible, horrible group, basically of brutal killers I put here, try and overthrow this other group of people because they were hurting American business, essentially. As far as today, and we'll kind of finish up with this. All right, we have the maquiladoras, which we'll talk more about when we talk about urban development and things like that. But basically, these are just border factories along the lines that provide services and provide goods to us in America, and obviously reduce labor costs. So really, the benefit for us is it's cheaper labor, cheaper products, and they're just large mass producing factories, but they just happen to be in Mexico. The other thing, as we can see, is the immigration issue has popped up many times between not only Mexico, but some of the Central American countries as well. So we're looking specifically at Guatemala, Nicaragua, El Salvador, which we have lots of immigrants into America. But the idea that some of these places run the risk of maybe having terrorists come into them through these different avenues into the country. So the immigration issue has been really, built up over the last, I'd say, 20-ish years. After 9/11, things like that, more concerned about how people are getting into the country and what are they doing when they get here. As far as for Mexico, a vast wealth disparity. Again, we use them for many things, many productions, many services that we have. Today we have free trade and we have worker passport systems. So we actually do have some situations where workers will come over for a short period of time, and we will allow them to work, whether that's in agriculture, mining, anything that they need, that we need services for. Obviously, the trade deals are a controversial topic as of today because our president is not very fond of free trade agreements. So in the coming years, that could be an issue that we see. Obviously, the drugs are a huge issue, and the trade of drugs across state lines, which is from parts of northern Mexico into parts of Texas and Arizona. Most economic products are agricultural based. I think we can all understand that. So fruits, okay, some sugar, things like that are going to be traded. And again, taking advantage of the locals as far as for the United States again. So poor workers farming the products in which make lots of money in this country. So the poor workers end up getting the short end of the stick. I put here cycle of violence, lots of civil war, leadership changes. So the instability of one person in charge. There's always situations where a person becomes powerful and then there's always a group of people or a small portion of the population that doesn't like the leader, so will do whatever it takes to overthrow that person. Some of the, I said long recovery, that is, in as yet unsuccessful, 60% to 80% of the population is below the poverty level. And there is a huge wealth disparity, which we've really talked about. And again, since it's farming, there's definitely a plantation style establishment. And we saw those in the videos out there where we looked at Guatemala, where, farmers were not enslaved, but they're making no money. They have no rights. They can't get consistent work, and that is very common in different countries. The other thing is the Central American Free Trade Agreement. This is the idea, very similar to NAFTA, but it's just CAFTA. So it is the idea that the goods in this particular area are free of trade and movement from place to place. And the idea behind this was just to kind of perk up the economic growth for the region, and try to keep people here instead of having them immigrate to other areas and provide their services specifically to the United States. The last thing here is the gangs and violence, drug cartels, MS-13, obviously originating in these areas of the world. So lots of problems, and particularly in this area with MS-13, and the ability for these groups of people to rule some of the people that move from the different parts of Central America still in these gangs and rooting themselves in parts of the DC area, LA, and all parts, pretty much all over the country, and still doing the things that they were doing in these Central American countries.